It's this time again. Never trust a zombie. Ha. Chapter 14, Seeing Red. Alright, this was not too long, but here we go. Nothing. No bodies. No vampire collectibles. Not even a sick note saying gotcha. The flood of relief is welcomed, but it quickly fades. I push back and fall into a sitting position on the floor. Since I'm here and have nothing else to do, I'll check the other casket. I spin myself around on the carpet and scooch closer to the casket. Perching on my knees once again for leverage, I pop the top on the second coffin. Empty again. Well, that was anticlimactic, but that's good in this case, I say out loud to myself. I close the lid on the second box and sit on top of it, slouching backward against the wall. In this posture, I notice the camera fixed in the opposite corner from me, way up near the ceiling. I wave to it and then fix my eyes on the ceiling above me and sit motionless. So they are watching me. This has been an experiment, but what was the question they were hoping to answer? Were they just trying to see how I would respond to the fear that my parents were dead and in these caskets? Maybe they were curious to see if I would even care enough to open the boxes to find out. Maybe it's all coincidence. The caskets were here, and this is the only room they have without windows where they can imprison me. Didn't Trent tell me this house used to be a funeral parlor before the Suttons moved in? I'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to think about any of it until they give me more information. There's no point in speculating about the welfare of my parents or my status as a prisoner. I make it through, singing only a few of my favorite songs to myself before there's a knock on the door, followed by the click of a key in the lock and then the door opening. Dr. Sutton appears with her white lab coat on and a clipboard in hand. "Hello, doctor," I say, trying to sound as disturbed as possible. "What's going on?" "As I mentioned before, you are our first human trial with a new strain of virus. We need to observe you and see how you take to the transition. I'll tell you flat out, we haven't had very good viability with our previous tests using rats, rabbits, and a cow. They weren't reanimating. It took us a while, but we think we figured it out and felt confident enough to try it on a human. I don't understand you at all. I don't understand this virus business. I don't understand why you're doing this to me, and I certainly don't understand why I want to be angry but keep returning to a relaxed state of calm. It aggravates me, now and then," I say. Dr. Sutton replies, "Eric, your experience so far has been very interesting to us. We don't remember the full details of our transitioning due to the passage of time. Like good scientists, we recorded as much data as we could, but our notes still miss some vital details, or at least we realize they do now after observing you. Aside from the quick fading of emotional responses you keep mentioning, you don't seem to be experiencing any difficulty with memory recall, or even spatial or social recognition. Quite phenomenal when compared with the process each of us went through. This room and the story about your parents was designed to test your personal relationship retention. We needed to see if you still had loyalty. It appears that you do. The quick fade of emotions is interfering with it, perhaps, but you still opened both caskets. Why did you do it?" Dr. Sutton's tone is very formal and scientific. I don't want to answer her because I don't like being an observed experiment, but once again I realize that it doesn't really matter. The situation being what it is, compliance on my part seems to be the best path, at least until I figure out what really has happened with my parents. When Frank threw me in here with the lights off, I was caught off guard and slightly offended, but I thought my parents were in here. I figured the lights were off and they were each in a bed, similar to how I found myself upon waking, upstairs. I was disturbed that I was disturbed that I was locked in, but decided to find the light switch and see what was going on anyway, thinking that perhaps I had been lied to again and my parents weren't actually here, and this room would be my new prison cell. Well, the light switch is in a stupid location, so I didn't find it for a while. But by that point, I had already come up with the idea that my parents might be in these coffins, and I had to know for sure. The feeling of suddenly imagining my parents both dead just a few feet from me was crippling, but since it kept fading, I was able to open both boxes and find out. The worst was when I found the first one empty and the thought that both were shoved in the other box as a way of torturing me came to mind. I also thought you might have put a note in one of them indicating this is a joke, but there was just a whole lot of nothing. Then when I sat down, I noticed a camera in the corner and realized you were running tests on me. I rattled this all off without ever looking at Dr. Sutton. Wow. Excellent response. Very thorough. Your science teachers must have enjoyed your lab reports. But also, wow for your thought processes through all of this. Do you feel like your thinking is any different now than it was before your transition? Dr. Sutton is obviously excited about something. Do you mean do I think differently now than I did when I was alive? Before you killed me? I know she doesn't like me using this language, but all this zombie stuff aside, I'm still a 17-year-old boy. "Eric, we did you a favor," she reminds me. "Making me a zombie is doing me a favor?" I ask. "Okay, first of all, look up the definition of zombie next time you see a dictionary. You don't meet the terms of the definition. None of us do. We use the term loosely, mostly for fun, but also because Rachel seemed to take to it more than reanimate. We keep it up for her sake, mostly. It's not a big deal. But in the interest of pure science, we aren't zombies. And when you answer my question, I think you'll find that even you don't really think that we killed you at all. Do dead people have conversations like this? She has a point. I haven't even checked myself for a pulse yet. All I know is I've been very sick and I've been told a lot of stories. I reach up and press a few fingers alongside my neck. What are you doing? Dr. Sutton asks, surprised. What are you doing? I don't know how to. What are you doing? Maybe that. Oh. Author notes. Weird choice of words, I think. Okay, whatever. Checking for a pulse. I haven't done this yet. All I know is that I've been really sick, but maybe I'm not actually dead like you. It's no good. Just like with Rachel the other day, I can't discern a pulse by touch. You won't be able to feel a pulse. Your blood pressure is way too low. But you can take my word for it. Your body expired and has been reanimated. By way of explanation, the virus replicates to all of your cells. The virus replicates to all of your cells, and for lack of better terminology, operates them. So your heart is being operated. It is beating, but remarkably slower and less powerful than before. Therefore, much lower blood pressure. It does beat, but without the virus, there's no way it would be considered life-sustaining. So then without the virus, I'm dead. See, I was right. I jump off the coffin and point an index finger at the doctor. Without skipping a beat or revealing any surprise by my action, Dr. Sutton says, I know you have never been dead before, yourself, but surely you have seen someone at a wake or funeral that was dead. Do you feel anything right now like you observed in that situation? I don't think she's going to let me get away with not answering this question. All right, no. Right now, for all intents and purposes, I don't appear to be dead. But to answer your first question, yes, there is a difference between my thinking today when compared to my thinking from a few days ago, before my transition. Aside from the messed up way I'm experiencing emotional reactions, I feel slightly detached, and at times I felt a strange deja vu or outside looking in effect. I did have the memory problems you mentioned at first, and had trouble recognizing Rachel and remembering you and Frank, but that went away after a while. I guess I could tell a difference, but really, if you would have just told me that I was really sick for a few days, I might not even realize I've been reanimated. Hence my self pulse check a moment ago. Reanimate, zombie. I think I'm with Rachel on that one. I'm going to keep using it, whether Webster approves or not. I sit back down on the edge of the casket. Fascinating. You have no regard for using words according to proper definition, she says as she makes a mark on her clipboard. I chortle at Dr. Sutton's attempt at humor and then roll my eyes dramatically to the right, like a couple of fighter jets in an air show flyby. You still have a sense of humor, I see, Dr. Sutton says. So that was a test comment. Apparently. Well, Eric, it is fascinating. The experience you are having when compared to the rest of us. Well, Eric, it is fascinating. The experience you're having when compared to the rest of us. I'm very, for some reason, I'm feeling very critical of my writing in this chapter. Side note, okay, back to the thing. I'm going to start over that paragraph. Well, Eric, it is fascinating, the experience you're having when compared to the rest of us. Your state of fugue lasted hours. We each experienced it to varying degrees, but over the course of days. There did seem to be a correlation with age, Rachel having the quickest recovery after transition and Frank having the slowest. Your recovery is significantly quicker than Rachel's was, and you are older than she was, though not by much more than a year. Tom and I are the same age, and we were only hours different, really. So age seems to be the primary factor without gender influence. Dr. Sutton looks at me and seems to sense my disinterest, or at least assumes I'm not interested in the details. So she just continues. We all experienced the emotional reaction with quick dissipation, but it was coupled with a deep apathy. We felt things, but didn't care so much. You seem to care a great deal. By your repeated use of the word kill, you clearly show you care. In your concern for your parents, you clearly show you care. If I read your expression correctly, you have care in regards to Rachel, though I'm not sure what the details are in that regard. She pauses. If she thinks I'm going to volunteer some information about my feelings toward Rachel, this will be a long, awkward silence for her. With no response from me, she continues. We've been working on the virus, primarily trying to make it more environmentally viable. We've been strengthening it against UV light and antiviral drugs. It's not easy to replicate it outside of a host, so the virus struggles in that regard. But we have built a strong virus. Of course, the best part of all, as you said it yourself, if you didn't know what had happened to you, you wouldn't realize you had transitioned. Dr. Sutton is a mad scientist. If I were James Bond, I suppose. What is this? Oh, he's thinking this. Okay. If I were James Bond, I suppose I would need to tell her she'll never get away with this. But I'm still not clear on what her goal is. I'm starting to think she wants to spread the virus to the public, but I'm not 100% on that yet. I recall Rachel telling me that this was Frank's agenda. She said her mom told her Frank wanted to cause an outbreak. Was Rachel lying to me, or was Dr. Sutton lying to Rachel? Come with me, Eric. Let's have a seat in the living room. I've been on my feet most of the day, Dr. Sutton says. Fine, but can you tell me what is going on with my parents? For real this time? Your parents are here and they are transitioning, just like we told you. There is another room upstairs across the hall from the one you were in. That's where they are. We called them Wednesday night to tell them you would come down with something and that I was going to take you under my care until you were better. Your mother was very concerned. When your father returned home from work, they both came over to see you. I didn't argue against it because I didn't want to raise any unnecessary suspicion. When they got here, we brought them to you. It was so soon after exposure that you appeared as though you were simply under the effects of a high fever, eyes closed, writhing a bit, moaning in pain. It was unsettling for your parents, particularly your mother, but they trusted my recommendation. We had a nice visit with them downstairs. They stayed nearly an hour. We had coffee. After we chatted for a while, they came back up to see you, and supposing you were finally resting comfortably, they didn't attempt to rouse you. Yeah, rouse. But, but left the room quietly. Had they gone in for closer inspection, they may have found you were no longer breathing. We were prepared if that happened. Fortunately, they returned home for the night. The next day, your mother came over early and wanted to see you. She sat by your bed for a few minutes, but it was difficult for her to see you in that much pain. It took some effort on my part, but I was able to convince her that everything was all right. She said she would come back with your father later that night. When they returned, we led them upstairs and into the room across the hall from where you were. They followed right in. Obviously, you weren't in there, so when your dad started to ask, well, no need for the details. Tom subdued your parents and we injected them with the same strain as we gave you. As I mentioned, age slows the recovery from the transition, so it will be a little bit longer for them than for you. But I don't expect very much longer after observing the great results of your trial, Dr. Sutton concludes. She smiles, I guess at her supposed success, which makes me angry, but only for a second, and then again a few seconds later, but this time only briefly. Stupid reanimated brain. I suppose she'll interpret my compliance as defeat, but I'm hardly defeated. My resolve is strong, fleeting from moment to moment, but overall strong. I need to find out the whole story. I need to know what Rachel knew about all of this. Is she as guilty as her mom, or was she manipulated in order to get me here? Did she know about my parents when she came up to talk with me? I don't recall her saying anything about them. They must have been across the hall by then, but I don't have a clear concept of the timeline. I tell the doctor, I'll go sit in the living room with you. I'll go sit in the living room with you now, but I want to know everything. I want to know why you're doing all of this. Why aren't you working to find a cure for this virus? Why are you making it stronger? What do you expect to do with it? We leave the coffin room, head through the lab, down the hall, and into the last place I saw through living eyes. I sit in the spot Dr. Sutton was in the other day. This way no one can sneak up on me from behind. It also means I'm cornered with no escape, but that kind of thing doesn't matter so much when you're already dead. I guess, to be fair, it also wouldn't matter if someone snuck up on me from behind. It might hurt to get planked in the head again, but only for a few seconds, like all of these other feelings. I certainly don't seem to have lost my scattered imagination through the transition. It feels good to be sarcastic, even if I'm the only one aware of it. Would you like anything to drink, Eric? Dr. Sutton asks, as though I've just arrived at her house for a book club meeting. Sure, formaldehyde, on the rocks, if you don't mind. That's another good one, I think. It just came to me. Are you sure? We have that. She trails off as she enters the kitchen, returning moments later with a couple of cans of soda. You can eat or drink whatever you want, really. Your body will process it, but it doesn't really have need of the same nutrients as before. Now, whatever the virus requires will be provided by brain. It is still important to keep hydrated, but not quite as important as it used to be for you. If you like soda, drink soda. That's what I do. And I don't have to worry about diet anymore, so that's a plus. Initially, I'm put off by Dr. Sutton's sudden casual demeanor, but I adjust to it quickly. I accept the cola and take a drink. I've noticed some differences in my perception of smell and sound, also touch and sight, but until now I haven't tasted anything previously familiar to me. The brain tasted fine, but it wasn't something I could compare to in the past, so I didn't yet know if my perception of taste was also different. Reason suggested it would be, and reason has been proven correct. I recognize the cola flavor and the sugar sensation, but it is different. Still favorable, but noticeably different. Life, or whatever this can be called, will never be the same. Dr. Sutton sits opposite from me, taking up my previous seat in this room. I wonder if the balance of power in this discussion will change with the new seating arrangement, or I'll just have to handle that on my own. I go on the offensive. So you've successfully turned me and my parents into reanimates. You've proven your new virus in human test cases. What's next for your virus and for my family? Dr. Sutton takes a long sip of soda and looks at me. I wait for her response. Finally, she says, naturally, we'd like to continue observing your family for a few weeks. 2 days hardly makes for conclusive evidence in such a study. It'll be a few days yet before your parents are even conscious. You'll all stay here with us for a while. Don't worry about the school or your father's work. It has all been taken care of. How? I interrupt. Well, with a cover story. One that fits that one that fits what you have been so often repeating, that your family is dead. You were killed in an automobile accident, all of you, Thursday night, when your parents were driving you to the hospital. Your dad was driving way too fast, but understandably so. You were very sick. Thomas provided sufficient evidence for this to be convincing. I interrupt again. Sufficient evidence? What does that mean? Well, it required a little deception on the part of some people in the roles of authority, but there are no ties to us. We aren't in hiding from everyone, Eric. We aren't alone in our project. That's news to me, and very interesting. Scary, but interesting. Rachel either lied to me about everything, or she was deep in the dark on all of this. I'd sure like to know which it is. Dr. Sutton continues, all of your property will be handled however the local officials handle such things. You, Eric Sutton, no longer exist in your old identity. If you need anything in the way of clothes or objects, we will get it for you. Until our observation phase is complete, you will not be allowed to leave the house, use the phone, or access the internet. You are on lockdown, but please don't take offense and feel like a prisoner. This is in the interest of science. Didn't Hitler and the Nazis use a similar line about the Holocaust? This time my question brings a serious reaction from the doctor. I guess no one likes being compared to a Nazi, not even a zombie mad scientist. I'm going to ignore that observation. You are restricted, yes, but it is for your own good. Once we've determined that the virus is settled and you are fully functional, we will develop a new identity for you and help you relocate to wherever you would like to go. Of course, by that time, if you are interested, we'd be happy to have you stay with us and help in our work. Do you mean help on the ranch and in the slaughterhouse? I ask. No, with the lab work and our next goal, Dr. Sutton seems to want to tell me, but she wants me to ask. This is so cliche for mad scientists. I don't like the way I read that. I'm going to read that over. No, with the lab work and our next goal. Dr. Sutton seems to want to tell me, but she wants me to ask. This is so cliche for mad scientists. Just like the parking lot full of pickup trucks, all stereotypes, even ones reserved for mostly fictional characters, are based on facts. Mad scientists are just looking for attention. Well, I guess we'll have to see how it goes over the next few weeks, and maybe you can give me a rundown of your next goal, but not now. I'd really like to go see my parents and maybe take some time to think about things for a while. I assume I have free run of the house and can claim the room I had transitioned in as my own? I ask. Dr. Sutton answers, of course, the room is yours. Feel free to visit your parents. You're free to roam the house. Unless, of course, the door is locked, but that's just good manners to respect that. Generally, the lab is the only door we lock. If you want to eat, the kitchen is kept stocked with standard human fare. You may or may not want to eat in order You may or may not want to eat in order to satiate inclinations towards it in your mind. There is another kitchen in the basement, which is accessible through the kitchen up here, where the brain is stored and prepared. Feel free to ask one of us for assistance if you get the craving. Learning the new cuisine is best through observation rather than listening to someone talk. Okay, thank you, I say. I stand up and finish off the last of the can of soda. You recycle? The irony strikes me and I decide to laugh about it later. Only people. Dr. Sutton apparently catches on to the humor as well. Just kidding, there's a bucket under the counter next to the dishwasher in the kitchen. Got it. I drop off the can, and on my way back through, I stop to ask another question. Dr. Sutton. Yes. When I was transitioning and mostly out of it, Rachel came to talk to me. I don't remember a lot of what she said, but one thing stuck, and I wanted to ask about it. She said something about sleeping. Do I not need to sleep anymore, or was she referring to during the transition? I asked. You can sleep, but you don't need to. We haven't found any amount of hours awake that will induce drowsiness. The only thing close to being tired is if we go too long without eating brain, then the virus weakens, and with it, we do as well. It is an awful feeling, and we avoid it as best we can. But occasionally, with scheduling at the slaughterhouse and through our beef trade, we do end up without brain to eat. We do end up without brain to eat for long enough to have an effect. It isn't often. So if you go up to the bed and lie down, it is possible you will fall. You will sleep. But for how long, or if you'll feel well rested after you wake up, there's no rhyme or reason to it that we've found yet. All right. Well, I'll see you around. And with that, I'm on my way up the stairs. I do not remember a lot of this story. I am not sure. This is kind of like parts of it I recall, but then some elements of it, I like. I remember the end, and I don't know how I get there from here. And I'm wondering if when I was writing the book, so I wrote it over the. I started it in March of 2013, and then published it for a couple days before Halloween that same year, so roughly 6 months. And I remember I wrote it a good portion of it, and then there's a couple weeks where I didn't work on it at all. And then when I got back to it, I just kind of picked up. I didn't outline or anything. I just typing it as I went, and I mean I would like work on some story concepts, as I'm like through the day. I'd be thinking about it and stuff, but I didn't have the whole thing completed in my head before I was writing it. And so at one point, might be here. That's why I'm wondering if there's a major plot hole right here, or whatever, some huge inconsistency. We'll find out together. But there is when I had written right right around here, and then took a break for a couple of weeks, didn't write for whatever reason. And when I got back to it, started writing again. I finished off the story, and then on my first read through, after I'd finished it, I realized that I had a massive issue in character consistency. Oh, it's raining now. From one chapter to the next. So it must have been where I had that break in my writing, totally ruined. It disconnected the first, 3/4 of the book to the end. Just totally took a role reversal for one of the characters, and did not work. So I had to decide what to keep and what not to keep. And I like the beginning, even though now I see it as kind of slow. Maybe I should have spiced it up a little bit, but I kept it. I kept that part as was, or as it is, as it was, whatever. And then I liked the ending at that point, so I had to transition. I had to bridge the gap I had started. So I had, here's the span. I cut this part out, so now I got to put a bridge in there. So I had to retype a little bit middle part to get the first 3/4 to fit with the last 16th. I don't know how much it was. The last little bit of the ending, and I think I did it. But I've reread it a couple times. I think I've read it 3 times since I published it. So it's just been so long that I've read it since the last time that I've completely forgotten how it ends, because I feel like, I don't know, whatever part of what I just said doesn't make any sense with how I think the thing ends. And then I also found some other part. Well, I realized that I set up myself for the start of the sequel I started writing, but also there was something I said, I didn't write it down, and I forgot what it was, but it was one of the last couple chapters um, that kind of took away from the start that I have to the sequel. Just started 10 years ago, and I haven't worked on it since. Maybe I did a little bit off and on, but what am I still talking for? That was the chapter. What chapter was it? 14? Seeing Red? Yeah, 14, Seeing Red. Which Seeing Red is one of my favorite songs by Unwritten Law. Go look it up if you are not familiar with it. Bye.